wife Mary to come to the British throne. They did come, they were uncontested, but many people had taken oaths of loyalty to the previous king. The previous king was King James II, not James I, for whom the King James Bible is named, but James II. James II was allowed to escape. Interesting story of intrigue, but they decided not to kill him. They had tried that with a monarch before, and it evoked so much sympathy that they realized it was not a good marketing ploy. But the problem is that the reigning monarch is still alive over in France. Now, a lot of people had taken a solemn oath that they would be faithful to James II so long as they or he were alive. And they were still alive, and he was still alive. So how could they then turn around and pledge their allegiance to another king? The people who refused to swear their oaths to the new king, William III, William of Orange, were called non-jurors. Okay? They were considered to be kind of politically dangerous people. Because they might be sympathetic to the old king who was over in France. You ever heard of Susanna Wesley and her husband Samuel? This is family business, okay, for them. Because one morning at prayer in the late 1690s, the Reverend Samuel Wesley, the vicar of Epworth in Lincolnshire, noticed that his wife, Susanna, did not say Amen to one of the prayers. And this was the prayer for the reigning monarch, the prayer for King William and his wife Mary, Queen Mary. And he questioned her about this, and it turns out that Susanna had come to doubt whether William and Mary were the legitimate monarchs. And it had problems for this family. Now here's, for those of you who are mathematically inclined, what is 9 times 18? Figure this out. 9 times 18.
162.
162, I think, right? Okay. It's 180 minus 18. Okay. 162 months pregnant. That's what Susanna Wesley was throughout her life. She had 18 children. Yeah, some of the women are getting it. Whoa, this is serious business. At this point, where Susanna refused to say amen to that prayer, and Samuel was very upset with his wife's political lack of loyalty, she goes the longest period in her adult life without being pregnant. Can you figure out what's going on here? And she wrote to a friend, she said, "We no longer share the marriage bed with each other." Okay? So this is a little soap opera that goes on. Here's the deal. On May the 8th, let's go back to that previous screen. On May the 8th, 1702, King William III died, and he was succeeded by Queen Anne. And apparently, Samuel and Susanna Wesley were reconciled at that point because their son, John Benjamin, was born 13 months later. It took them 4 months to sort of figure out their relationship, and then they figured it out. John was born on June the 17th, 1703. So on June 17th, 2003, we celebrated John Wesley's 200th birthday. His brother Charles was born a few years later on December the 18th, 1707. So in December of 2007, we celebrated Charles's 300th birthday. John went to a very exclusive school called Charterhouse School. Now this is what in Britain they call a public school, but it's what we would call a private school. They just use words a little differently than we do. It was built in an old Carthusian monastery. That's what a charter house meant. And it had no heating or certainly no air conditioning. British still didn't have air conditioning in the 1970s when we were living there. And most of the time that wasn't an issue, but not having heating in the winter is an issue there. The boys lived in the monks' cells, and they worship in the chapel there at Charterhouse. That's where John Wesley went to school. His brother Charles went to a school called Westminster School, not far away there in London. In 1714, Queen Anne died, and King George I came to the throne.